I used to think hotel rooms were the safest places to sleep. Neutral territory, no history, no attachment, just a bed, a locked door, and the promise that by morning you'd be somewhere else. That belief lasted until a work trip I took to Oregon about 4 years ago. And I was traveling alone for a regional training seminar, and the company booked us into a medium-sized hotel near the outskirts of Portland. Not downtown, not rural, just far enough away that everything felt quiet once the sun went down. When I checked in, the lobby was almost empty. A single desk clerk sat behind the counter typing slowly, like she was in no rush to finish whatever task she was on. There was soft music playing overhead, the kind hotels use to sound calm but end up making the silence feel louder. She asked for my ID, clicked around on her computer, then frowned slightly. "Looks like your room was already prepared," she said. I didn't think much of that. I assumed that was her way of saying it was ready early. She handed me 2 key cards. I paused. "I only need one." She smiled politely. "That's okay. We issue 2 by default." That wasn't unusual, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. My room was on the 4th floor, halfway down the hall. As I stepped out of the elevator, I noticed how quiet it was. No TVs through the walls, no voices, just the faint hum of the building itself. Room 412. When I opened the door, the lights were already on. That stopped me for a second. I stood there, half in the hallway, half inside the room, scanning every corner. The bed was made. The curtains were open. The TV was off. Everything looked normal, too normal. I told myself, no housekeeping probably forgot to turn the lights off. I locked the door behind me and slid the deadbolt into place. I dropped my bag by the desk and did my usual routine. Bathroom check, closet check, under the bed. Nothing out of place. No sign anyone else had been there. But the feeling didn't leave. The room felt occupied, even though it clearly wasn't. That night, I ordered room service and watched TV until I fell asleep. I remember waking briefly around midnight, rolling over and noticing the desk chair facing the bed. I don't remember moving it. I was too tired to care. Sometime later, much later, I woke up again. This time I was fully awake. The room was dark except for the faint orange glow of the digital clock on the nightstand. 2:41 a.m. I heard a soft sound. Not a knock, a card swipe. The unmistakable beep of a key reader outside my door. My body went cold instantly. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the door, waiting for the handle to turn. It didn't. After a few seconds, I heard the card swipe again. Another beep. Then silence. I lay there for a full minute before sitting up slowly and turning on the lamp. The deadbolt was still engaged. I got out of bed, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices. I checked the hallway through the peephole. Empty. The next morning I went downstairs and mentioned it casually at the front desk. "I think someone tried to get into my room last night," I said. The clerk, different woman this time, pulled up my reservation. "What time?" "A little before 3. She checked the system logs, then shook her head. "There were no staff entries to your room." I asked if another guest could have been issued a key by mistake. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "That wouldn't be possible," she said. "Only 1 key set was issued." I frowned. "You gave me 2. She looked up at me slowly. "No," she said. "We issued 1. She turned the screen toward me. There was only 1 active key listed. I reached into my wallet and placed both cards on the counter. Her expression changed. She excused herself and went into the back office. When she came back, She avoided eye contact. Did anyone else travel with you? She asked. No. She nodded slowly. Okay. That night, I slept with the lights on. At exactly 2:41 a.m., I heard it again. A card swipe. This time, the handle turned. It stopped at the deadbolt. I stayed completely still. From the other side of the door, a voice spoke, quiet, calm, and very close. You still have my key. I didn't respond. The voice sighed. Checkout is tomorrow. Footsteps walked away. In the morning, I checked out early. As I handed over my key card, the clerk looked confused. You're returning both, she asked. I told her yes. She stared at them for a long moment, then said something I still think about whenever I stay in a hotel. We've been missing one of those, she said. It belonged to the last guest in that room. I asked what happened to them. She hesitated, then said, They never checked out. I've always been a light sleeper, which is ironic because of what happened during this trip to Colorado a couple of years ago. I was there for a software conference, and like usual, the company booked a hotel for me at the last minute. The hotel itself looked modern in the pictures, but when I arrived, I could immediately tell it had the same dull, recycled feel of most business-class hotels. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting in the hallway, generic abstract art, and a faint smell of cleaning chemicals lingering in the lobby. The check-in process was unremarkable, save for the clerk glancing at me for longer than usual when I handed over my ID. She smiled politely, but there was something behind it, almost like recognition. I shrugged it off. Maybe she thought I looked like a regular business traveler. My room was 210 on the second floor, overlooking the parking lot. The elevator ride up was quiet, eerily so. The kind of silence that feels unnatural in a building full of people. When I reached the floor, the hallway was empty, except for the hum of the lights and the faint muffled sound of a TV from somewhere down the hall. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. Immediately I noticed the odd quiet of the room. Not the usual background hum of air conditioning or the faint elevator buzz. Nothing. It was just silent. I set my bag down and began my standard routine. Bathroom check, closet check, drawers check. Everything looked normal, spotless, empty. I went to bed around 11 p.m., exhausted from travel and meetings. It was a weeknight, so the building was quiet. I fell asleep almost immediately, only to wake up around 2 a.m. to a faint sound. At first I couldn't place it, like a soft creak, a wooden floor settling maybe. But then it came again, this time with a rhythm. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing, above me. I froze. I live alone. The thought that someone could be wandering above my head shouldn't scare me. I reasoned it was just maintenance or maybe the building settling. But something about it didn't feel right. The footsteps weren't continuous. They stopped, started, paused. And every time I swore I heard them, it was as if someone knew I was listening and wanted me to know. I tried to ignore it, pulling the blanket up to my chin, but I couldn't sleep. Every small sound, the flicker of the air vent, the soft hum of the fridge, even the scratching of my pen against the paper I had left on the desk, made me tense. And then came the whisper. It was soft, almost inaudible, like someone had pressed their lips to the ceiling. My name. I don't even remember exactly what it was, maybe just my first name, but I knew it was directed at me. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. My room was empty. The room above me, empty according to the booking system. No one was supposed to be there. I lay back down, convincing myself it was my imagination. Maybe I'd left a voice memo recording. Maybe the TV had some static I misinterpreted. I even got up to check my phone and verify notifications. Nothing. The next day, I asked the front desk if there was any work being done in the rooms above mine. They looked puzzled. Room 310, I asked, and they nodded. No one is booked there tonight. It's been empty for months, the clerk said. I didn't push it further. Hotels have mistakes, right? Maybe someone had lost a key. Maybe the floorboards were warped. I tried to forget about it. That night, I tried sleeping again around 11:30 p.m., but I didn't last long before the footsteps returned. Slightly louder this time, deliberate, methodical. But now they weren't pacing, they were standing still. I could feel the vibrations through the ceiling. A soft thump. Pause, thump again. And then a dragging sound like furniture being moved slowly. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I shined it on the ceiling, expecting to see shadows, but nothing. No ceiling cracks, no sign of anything moving above me. I wanted to convince myself it was a maintenance crew, but even that didn't fit. No other rooms were occupied on that floor. I could hear the parking lot below. No trucks, no cleaning carts, just silence except for whatever was above me. The whisper came again. This time it was clear. Don't leave. Stay. I felt my stomach turn cold. My hands gripped the sheets. I didn't move. I wanted to leave the room immediately, but the thought of stepping into the hall in the middle of the night was worse. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt warped. I finally dozed off somewhere after 4 a.m., only to wake a few hours later with sunlight streaming in. I didn't hear anything after dawn. The room seemed normal. Too normal. When I checked out, I asked the clerk about room 310 again, casually. She looked at the computer, brows furrowed. That room has been empty for months, sir. No one has stayed there since the previous guest checked out last spring. She hesitated. Are you sure you were in 210 last night? I nodded. Absolutely. She gave me a strange look. Well, housekeeping did report something odd. They found a chair in 210 moved slightly from where it should have been, and the rug looked like someone had dragged something across it. She paused. But the camera in the hall didn't show anyone entering your room. I swallowed hard. Maybe a maintenance crew? I offered. She shook her head. Nothing was scheduled last night. The cameras don't lie. I left quickly. For the next few weeks, I avoided hotels with floors that had empty rooms directly above me. I tried to rationalize everything: sleep deprivation, imagination, stress. But there's one thing I can't explain. When I returned to my office that week, I found a hotel envelope slipped under my office door. It had my name on it. Inside was a simple note typed on hotel letterhead. Thank you for staying. Room 310 misses you. I never stayed in that hotel again. I've never been superstitious, but this experience in Arizona made me rethink the way I look at hotel rooms. I was traveling for work again. Another conference, another hotel, another city I barely knew. The hotel was newer this time, a sleek glass building in downtown Phoenix. Everything looked modern, clean, and safe. I almost laughed to myself when the lobby music piped in classical piano instead of the usual generic pop. It felt off. In retrospect, that should have been my first warning. I checked in without incident and received my room key. Room 724 on the 7th floor. When I reached the hallway, I noticed that the room next door, room 723, had its lights off. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes rooms are empty, but the door seemed oddly pristine. No scuffs, no fingerprints, nothing to indicate recent use. It looked untouched, almost like it hadn't been opened in months. I shrugged it off and went into my room. The usual routine: bag down, bathroom check, closet check, under the bed, drawers. Everything was perfect, clean, ordered, empty, normal. The kind of normal that makes you feel safe, but also a little isolated. That night, around 11:45 p.m., I was scrolling through my phone when I heard it. A soft knock. Not on my door, but from the room next door. It was slow. 1, 2, 3 taps. I froze. Maybe it was the walls creaking. Maybe someone had locked themselves out. I waited, telling myself it was nothing. Then the knock came again, slightly louder, same rhythm, slow, deliberate. I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. My heart thumped. I tried to laugh it off. Old building, I told myself, just settling. I sat back on the bed, trying to ignore it, but then came a whisper, soft, almost a breath. Hello? It wasn't loud enough for anyone else to hear, but I knew it was coming from room 723. I froze. The first thought that came to mind was that a guest might have mistakenly walked in through the fire door or was lost. But then I remembered I had the only key for 724 and the next room. It was supposed to be empty. I got up and walked slowly to the door. I pressed my ear against it. There it was again. A whisper. This time it sounded like someone calling my name. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. My rational mind screamed, "It's nothing. It's probably some electronic noise, a TV, a phone, or maybe a neighbor down the hall." But the whisper was distinct, personal, directed at me. I spent the next hour trying to convince myself I was imagining things. The knocks didn't continue. The whispers didn't return. I turned on the TV for background noise and sat on the edge of the bed listening to the soft hum of the room, trying to calm down. Around 2 a.m., I woke again. This time it was movement, faint shuffling, almost like footsteps on carpet. Not heavy, not loud, just movement across the hall from room 723. I tried not to breathe too loudly. I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to hear. Then I heard it clearly. A soft scraping sound like someone dragging their hand along the wall, moving slowly. And then a voice, whispered, almost tender, almost sad. "Why are you here? Why are you in my room?" My heart nearly stopped. "Your room?" I whispered back. My own voice sounded hollow in the empty space. No response, just silence. I waited. Too long. Then a knock at my door. Single, sharp, deliberate. My hands froze midair. I didn't move. I didn't respond. I eventually mustered the courage to grab my phone and check the time. 3:04 a.m. I stayed awake the rest of the night. Lights on. Every muscle tense. I didn't dare open the door. I didn't sleep. When morning came, I showered, packed, and went downstairs without breakfast. I told myself it was stress, jet lag, whatever. Maybe I had been hearing things. At the front desk, I casually asked about the room next door. The clerk typed something on her computer and then frowned. "Room 723, she said. "Why do you ask?" I hesitated. "No reason, I'm just wondering if it's occupied tonight." She stared at the screen. "It's empty. It hasn't been rented in over a year." I blinked. "A year?" She nodded. "We keep it for special maintenance access, but otherwise it's not in use, and housekeeping hasn't entered it in months." I laughed nervously, trying to make it casual. "Must have been some weird echo then." She shrugged, clearly not paying too much attention. I left quickly. I returned home and tried to put it out of my mind. Days later, I got an email from the hotel. It was odd, formal, and brief. Subject: Room 723 body. Thank you for staying with us. We noticed you in close proximity to room 723. Please be advised that the room remains unoccupied and unavailable to guests. We apologize for any confusion." I laughed at first. Then the date on the email caught me off guard. It had been sent at 3:05 a.m., the exact time I had seen the whisper and the knock. I called the hotel demanding an explanation. They claimed the email was automated, sent when housekeeping logged proximity sensors in the hallway near restricted rooms. I asked why the room would trigger sensors when it hadn't been entered. The woman on the phone paused, long enough to make me uncomfortable. Then she said softly, "Sir, no one has entered that room in over a year. That includes anyone on staff." To this day, I have no explanation. But I do know one thing. Whenever I stay in a hotel, I always avoid rooms directly adjacent to ones that are empty, especially if they have their own whispering silence. I don't usually travel alone, but this trip to Maine was different. I was attending a short workshop in a small coastal town. Flights had been delayed, and I arrived later than planned, exhausted and eager to sleep. The hotel looked quaint from the outside, red brick, low-rise with flickering lanterns along the walkway. But there was a charm to it. I assumed it would be quiet, peaceful, a safe place to rest. I checked in at about 10 p.m. The lobby was empty except for a middle-aged man behind the desk. He greeted me with a polite nod, barely looking at my ID before handing me a key card. "Room 109, top floor, end of the hall," he said. I noticed his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. That subtle, quick glance, almost like he was weighing something. But I dismissed it. The elevator ride up was silent, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of the small noises you usually ignore. The soft hum of the elevator motor, my own footsteps on the carpet, the faint creak of the walls. When I reached the top floor, the hallway stretched long and empty. Room 109. I slid the key into the card reader. It beeped, and the door clicked open. The room was clean, minimal, and oddly warm. I set my bag on the dresser, did the usual checks, bathroom, closet, drawers, and sat on the bed, letting out a long sigh. The quiet was comforting, almost too comforting. I fell asleep quickly, only to wake around 1:37 a.m. to a sound that made my blood run cold. The faint creak of a chair moving. Not in my room, across the hall. I froze, listening. The sound repeated slowly, drag, creak, scrape. A chair being shifted on hardwood or tile. But the hall was supposed to be empty. I didn't hear anyone approaching my door. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it down the hallway. Empty. No maintenance, no late-night wanderers. Just the faint glow of the emergency exit signs at either end. I went back to bed, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. That's when I heard a voice, soft, clear. "Are you awake?" It wasn't muffled. Not through the walls. From somewhere down the hall, close but distant. I sat up. My pulse spiked. "Hello?" I whispered, hoping no one had access to a room key. Silence. Then the voice again, softer this time. "You shouldn't be here." I told myself it was a hotel employee checking rooms, but the voice didn't match anyone's I'd met. And besides, why whisper? Why not knock or speak normally? I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening. At intervals, I heard slow footsteps, creaks, whispers. Nothing aggressive, nothing demanding. Just a presence, observing, waiting. Morning came, and I nearly ran to the front desk. I asked casually about the room across the hall. The clerk typed for a moment, then blinked slowly. "Room 110?" I said, correcting myself. "Yes," he said, "it's technically empty. No guest has been booked there for over a year." I tried to hide my unease. Really, because I kept hearing noises last night. The clerk leaned forward, speaking softly. We sometimes leave it unlocked for cleaning purposes. But no one entered last night. Housekeeping doesn't start until 7 a.m. I nodded, not wanting to press. But I knew what I'd heard, Atas. I knew what I'd felt. I left the hotel quickly and tried to put it out of my mind. A few days later, I received an email with the subject line, "Thank you for your stay." The body was generic. Billing, checkout info, nothing unusual. Until I noticed the timestamp, 3:42 a.m. That was the exact window when I'd woken to the voice, the footsteps, the chair moving across the hall. I laughed nervously. A coincidence, I told myself. Then I saw the attachment. It was a PDF, labeled Room 110 Incident Log. Curious, I opened it. The first entry was mundane. Maintenance scheduled for room 110. The second, unusual presence detected, staff report none in room. The third entry made me drop my coffee. It was a video frame capture from the hallway camera, time-stamped 3:41 a.m., showing my door. And in the reflection of the mirror across the hall, I could clearly see someone standing in the shadow of room 110, barely moving, facing me. I stared at it for what felt like minutes. My own figure was reflected, yes, but the second figure, tall, lean, featureless in the dark, did not belong to anyone I had seen. The timestamp matched the exact moment I had heard the voice. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but then I noticed something else. The figure appeared in every frame for over 5 minutes, standing in place, completely still, as if waiting for me to notice. I deleted the PDF and the email. I told myself it was a glitch, some video anomaly. But to this day, whenever I stay in a hotel, I always avoid end-of-hall rooms adjacent to empty rooms. I cannot shake the feeling that the hotel keeps its past guests close, even after they're gone. And sometimes, when the lights are off, I can still hear that soft whisper coming from rooms that should be empty. Why are you here? You shouldn't be here.